As I always say, it's great to be alive. All right. So as you know, as I talk to my friends on this subject, just to sort of preamble it ahead of anything, I try not to get into the complexities of it. It's all about, well, how do we improve our lives, right? I mean, there is, if you think about going to a mechanic, for example, and you say my engine doesn't work, he doesn't sit there and describe for you the fluid dynamics of fuel and the electromechanics of solenoids. He sticks his head underneath the hood and tinkers around with it for a little bit and comes back and says, listen, I got to replace this and you have to do that. You drive off, not ever knowing the physical scientific principles of how an actual engine works. And I
Nor
think
does
that's,
most people care, right?
they don't care. They just want to be, at the end of the day, we want to be happy, right? And I just produced a short article on loneliness, and it was kind of interesting, right? Oh, by the way, Dr. Jerry Smith. Just to sort of get the preamble over here, I do like just talking to friends like this, and but I am Dr. Jerry Smith. My background is computer sciences. My specialty is artificial intelligence, cognitive sciences on top of that. I spend a lot of time with the neuroscience field in thinking about how we can make the next generation of computers, software, more like us in good ways, right? Not in those sort of evil,
Scary ways.
robotic Terminator ways, right?
Thanks for
And,
clarifying too.
yeah, yeah. And so if you think about that, if you think about what makes us so special as human beings, our ability, first and foremost, to care for each other, right? I mean, that's huge, right? We started off a long time ago. We were individualistic. We grew into to clans and tribes, and pretty soon those tribes were connected through cities, and the average distance between cities was as far as you can go on a horse during a daytime. There's a lot of models about that, but we ended up having a language, and that language did one thing, two things really important. One is it shared ideas, right? The second is it shared emotions, right? We told stories. We told stories of the big bad wolf. Told stories of the cave, the parable of the cave. And that allowed us to not only have the emotions we felt inside and the emotions that we had with other people, but shared those emotions. So when I think about the next generation of these systems that we want help with, the key thing that's missing isn't data, right? And now you're in my world, isn't intelligence, right? It can compute 1 + 1 faster than you and I can. It's the lack of emotion, right? So what we say is, real intelligence has two components, three if you include culture. But one is it has to be smart, IQ, and the second is it has to have emotion, EQ. And as my wife reminds me constantly, I need work on that second one a lot in my life. So in the emotional sense, that's what makes us unique. So I spend a lot of time studying that. In order to study that, that gets into the neuromechanics of the brain, right? And that's when we started talking at the Synapse Summit, just about why we do the things we do. And I heard you talking a little bit about affirmations, and one of the areas that I do spend a lot of time on is sort of helping people understand one of the principles that I learned about the brain, and that is, how does it learn? Where does it learn? What role does saying things like "I am a good person" play in our life? And by the way, is me just saying that I'm a good person, is that the same? Is that the most powerful way to invoke that affirmation? And the answer is no, it's not. There are things that we absolutely have to do in order for our brain to change, which changes our personality, which then changes our behavior, which then sets us on a new path. And that I hope to talk about today.
Yeah, I know the mind is a very powerful thing.
It is. It's an awesome thing. I mean, um, which leads us into sort of a, well, where do you unravel this? It's like grandma's yarn, right? There are so many
Right.
different threads you can pull on here. I think, let's lay down some terms, right? So when we talk about changing the brain, I totally believe in therapy. Once a week, I am the biggest promoter of going and seeing my therapist. Why? Because my brain is the way I make money, right? I think most people today, most people I don't mean to say this in a different way. There are two kinds of people: people who make money thinking and solving problems cerebrally, and people who use their hands to build things, right? I'm not a builder of things with my hand. I mean, please don't ask me to put up a house. Please don't ask me to grow crops. Please don't ask me to fix your engine, right? I'm just going to mess all that up. I'm a thinker. I think about things. I do things with my head. I speak. I communicate. If my head isn't working, there's no value coming out of me, right? So I spend a lot of time with my therapist every week to clean out my head. How does that work? Well, the biggest term I think anybody who wants to look at this world needs to understand is this concept of plasticity, neuroplasticity, right? What is our brain? And this is where we'll get into a little bit of the mechanics and then step back. But we have a brain which is organized around a series of neurocells connected by long highways of what things called axons, and then split off into these dendrites, which at the end of the road, you have a junction, which then feeds into a lot of other garages. Think of those as the axons that compute the stuff. So the brain is a large chemical, electrochemical computer, right? And that's really super important. It's composed of 10 to the 12th neurons. That's a big number. It's a million billion, I think is the way you think about it. And each of those little processors, each of those little electrochemical processors are connected to 10,000 other electrochemical processors. That's freaking amazing. I mean,
amazing. Just in that one statement, right? Humans are amazing. Yeah.
That is,
it can be.
That in and of itself should get you, as you're sitting down drinking a glass of wine, a beer, a Tito's, you should just go, you should be in awe of that. And just to think about how every morning you wake up and it still works, right? Just think about that. Every night when you go to bed and you wake up in the morning, you don't wake up going, who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? How do I breathe? How do things move around?
You learn everything. Yeah, you know everything.
Yeah, this neural system we have, right? That goes from here all the way down to your toes, right? Composed of the brain, the nervous system. Neurons aren't just up in here. It's all throughout our body. Matter of fact, a little side bar here. We often hear the term, I have butterflies in my stomach. I got this gut feeling. Women are really good at this. They have specialized neurons in those areas that tend to make them feel a certain way, nauseous in a certain way over certain events. That's actually a neurological response that starts in the brain. Anyways, so how does your brain grow? Why are we talking about that? Because affirmations, right?
Right.
So let's first think about a little bit about that neuroplasticity. And I think everybody will get it at the end of this. So neuroplasticity is the ability of that huge electrochemical computer, up on your shoulders to change over time, right? And what happens? Those potassium chloride levels between the synapses, it's just a little chemical channel there. That's all it is. By the way, that's why when you get a concussion, why does the world go crazy when you get a concussion? It's like dropping your computer. All those fluids, all those potassium chloride solutions that exist between this little tiny gap in these neurons get shifted around and your world goes blank. So how does that change? Well, there's a process. There's basically three kinds of chemicals that we look at in the brain. Neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to change. A lot of people think, and now, by the way, I'm going to point out to you and your audience that my wife finally says, I know what's wrong with you. And I said, what's wrong with me? She says, and I should actually turn off my phone when I'm talking to folks like this. I apologize. My wife says, I'm like that cat with the red laser dot on the floor. Once it sees a problem, it starts chasing it around like crazy, right? So I apologize ahead of time if I get overexcited about some of this stuff, but it is kind of fun and amazing. And it's like, once you get your head around certain aspects of it, it actually should change your life. And until you get your hands around that, it can feel really crazy and confusing. And so in that space, I try to get as much information out at once to sort of have a legitimate sort of constructive conversation in there. So big things I wanted to get out. First of all, is the brain is complex. The second of all is for it to learn, it has to be plastic, what we call neuroplasticity. That is, it changes those pieces in there. Now, here's something that people often that don't really know. And I think we talked about this. Well, when do people learn, right? You wake up in the morning, we're having a conversation. I introduce you to the term neuroplasticity. I introduce you to the term, neurons and axons and dendrites and stuff like that. Did you learn that right now? And the answer is no. We actually don't learn during our waking period. And there's the first clue when it comes to how do we make effective affirmations. I wake up in the morning, I grab my cup of coffee, my good caffeine stimulus, which is important, by the way. It's an important part of our day. At some point, we should talk about the two primary kind of cycles
Cheers
we have.
to that. I'm gonna have a sip of my coffee.
I think I'm on 18 now. I'm 18. So, we have two primary cycles during the daytime. It's really important in that first part of the morning, that first 90-minute ultradian cycle. We have our normal 24-hour cycle, but in the day we have these 90-minute cycles that our body is tuned to. That first 90-minute cycle, if your body allows you to have stimulants like caffeine, it's important because it blocks these two neuroreceptors, which cause us to be sleepy. That's a whole different subject. But in the course of affirmations, when I say, I am a good person, did my body learn anything from that? Or was it just words that came out here, went around, went back into my ears and bounced around and channeled with my linguistic processing systems? Did it just do that? Well, the answer is I didn't learn anything from that. And that's because learning takes place at night. It takes place during the what we call REM period, our deep sleep period, right? We have 2 periods of sleep at night. When you go to bed, the very first part of your sleep is a slow wave sleep, right? It's typically in your delta waves area. So you're sleeping, you're turning over, you're just now getting into sleep, and you get the slow wave sleep, but it's in that REM period when your brain does something very, very special. It cleans up stuff. And this leads us into another part of the conversation. I mentioned the brain is a electrochemical computer, right? We're familiar with the electrical part of it, but what are the chemicals there? And we call those neuromodulators, right? So the brain learns, that big organic computer on top of your head, its neuroplasticity is modulated in adults, what we call modulated, changed in adults by what we call neuromodulators. And these neuromodulators, we have 4, which are really important. And you've heard of some of them, like dopamine, right? Dopamine's a really important neuromodulator. It's released anytime you sort of achieve a milestone. People often say, oh, dopamine, that's the chemical of addiction. Well, no, addiction is associated with milestones, and which is filling your body back up with chemicals and getting you high. But dopamine is really released anytime you achieve a goal. Goal can be achieving an affirmation in life. We also have serotonin, which is a module that is a neuromodulator that tends to make us feel good with what we have. It's super important. Then we have, I'm going to hold off on this one. Then we have epinephrine, which is the neuromodulator of tension, right? It's typically associated when we feel alert and agitated. The last one, acetylcholine, super important. So when an individual gets excited, stuff comes into our brain, there's an emotional connection to it. Acetylcholine is released into the system and paints those neurons in your brain that says to our computer up here, this was important, right? I'm looking at my camera right now, not important. I'm thinking about how important I achieved this one goal. I ran 8 miles in the shortest time I ever had. I finished the run. I went, oh, how excited was I? That emotion, coupled with the event itself, was painted by acetylcholine. And why is that important? Because when you go to bed at night, you make it through that slow wave sleep into that really deep REM sleep. That acetylcholine then changes the strength of those neurons that were associated with that event. So the next time I think about running, I have this emotional dopamine dump that's easy, that's associated with the pleasures in life that come more naturally. So one of the key things with affirmations is just not saying them. What do we have to do? We
Believe it,
have to
feel it.
associate them with some emotions, right?
Okay.
Strong visualization,
Okay.
just not visualization. I'm a good person. That does nothing. I think about myself. I am a good person. How was I a good person? Oh, you know what? I remember helping that little old lady across the street. Remember how that made you feel? I'm a good person. Guess what? That got painted. I can just feel it in my body. That got painted tonight when I go to sleep. That little piece is going to paint in there that I'm a good person. It's going to be associated with that positive feeling, that visualization of that grandma. I remember taking her bag, going across it. That happened when I was a teenager, just a mere 10 years ago. I'm glad you guys got that. Of course, that's a little scary on top of that. That's not supposed to be a joke. So the first thing is, what is it? And by the way, it's about you. It's a strong visualization. So I see it. And then most importantly, I feel it. And where does those things take place, right? So now we think about the structure of the brain. We think about our amygdala. We think about our basal ganglia. We think about our lateral cortex. And then we think about this thing called the orbital frontal cortex. It's the frontal cortex is here, decision making. Right underneath it, right in here, is the orbital frontal cortex, which is associated with mixing emotions with events. So when you mix that emotion, how did that feel with this affirmation, this executive function about thinking about, I am a good person? That then gets painted into your system so that at night when you go to sleep, which is a separate event that we have to do. And that's why, by the way, sleep is so important. Good sleep is important, but most important, consistent sleep. So whether or not you're sleeping 4 hours a night, that's not the issue. The issue is you don't want to sleep 4 hours one night, 5 hours the next night, 3 hours the night after that. You want 4 hours every night, 5 hours every night, whatever it is. But you need that consistent, repetitive sleep so that REM period in your brain can identify that acetylcholine painted constructs and then change your brain in form of neuroplasticity, which then causes us to learn so that the next time we're in a situation where I'm thinking, I am, and I feel that kind of emotion, a good person, it changed my body. Mm-hmm. That's the mechanics of all this stuff,
I have a
sort of around the world.
For you around sleep, because I feel like so many people have issues with sleep, so they're not getting that learning or those, what you need in order to really learn and absorb what you did that day. So what do you do in order to get good REM sleep, deep sleep? Is there certain steps that you take prior to going to bed?
Absolutely. Yeah. And everybody's different, but there's some things that we do know. So you think about your circadian rhythm, right? 24-hour a day period. And I mentioned that you have, so couple fun words, circadian rhythm. I think people know that. They're familiar that in the morning they're somehow awake, and at night somehow they get tired, and somehow most people tend to want to fall asleep at night, and most people want to stay awake in the daytime. Now that's not true for everybody, and certainly it's counterproductive for people who are night workers, right? But for the most part, we have that. Within that 24-hour cycle, we have these little 90-minute cycles that span through the day, and they're ultradian cycles. It's super important, right? Everybody has these 90-minute cycles. They start from the first time you wake up. And by the way, one of the first things you need to do in order to get a good night's sleep, you have to wake up in the right way. That's where your good night's sleep starts. Your good night's sleep doesn't start by putting your head on the pillow. It starts by waking up correctly. So,
what's the correct way?
And the way we wake up correctly, isn't on our face, after having a binge night of drinking. Obviously, that's counterproductive. I'll just say a little thing. I neither am a believer. I don't have any opinions on anybody's use of drugs or alcohol, but when it comes to helping your neurological functions, they play no role, and they're counterproductive to a healthy mental life cycle. Now,
And I feel
do
like
I
we
drink?
talk
Of
about
course
that.
I drink. But do I drink in order to have a better cognitive life? Absolutely not, right? So that's a key thing. So in the morning, what do you do? As soon as you wake up in the morning, the most important thing for you to do is to open those eyes and look at that, not look into the sun. Please don't do that. But to get those warm rays, those red and blue rays coming in. We have special cells in the eyes that pick up those rays, and they start the restart the 24-hour clock. It physically tells your body you are awake. There are certain things you need to do. There are certain chemicals that are melatonin, for example, that are now being reduced in your body. Melatonin allows you to relax and sleep at night. So it is now being shut off. At the same time, it starts a chemical clock, which builds up through the day. That chemical clock impacts these, what we call the D1, D2 receptors in the brain, which actually make you sleepy and tired. So how do we feel alert in the morning? What is the one way you just showed me that you feel alert in the morning?
Coffee.
Coffee. And what's in coffee?
Caffeine.
Caffeine blocks those two receptors. So in the morning, you get up, you see that beautiful sky, you get artificial lights, you get that warmth of those blue, red rays coming in your body triggers, it says it's time to start doing the things I need to do. You then block if you can take caffeine, not everybody can take caffeine, right? So check out with your doctors on that little subtext there. But if you can, having that caffeine, I'm not talking about loading it up with saccharin. I'm not talking about loading it up with creams and creamer. I'm talking about a good cup of Joe that will get into your system, will paint those those D1, D2 receptors, which then allows your brain to actually become alert. And you do that on no food, if you can get by with that, right? Because food actually has a process that actually pulls energy from your body and makes you tired. So you wake up, you get the sun, you take the coffee, do a little physical exercise. That's the way you start your day for the first 90 minutes. After 90 minutes, breakfast is fine. Thinking about what you're eating in life. Are you going to eat the carbohydrates in life, which tend to slow you down, or you can eat proteins, which tend to spike you up? Most people would probably say proteins, like with eggs and stuff like that. So getting those proteins in your systems, those little energy pills into your system to generate the kind of energy you need, is an important part of the morning. One thing I wanted to point out was, without that right sleep, not only do we not get the REM, which we haven't even talked about, but also your brain kind of swells during the daytime. So in the morning, you are in the best shape possible. Get the sun, get the caffeine, a little protein in our system. Our body is set for the day. Throughout the day, that brain expands just a little bit. It actually reduces your effectiveness, so that the first 7 to 8 hours of your day are your most productive, right? And for some people, the creative stuff occurs during that first ultradian cycle, that first 90-minute cycle. For me, that's when it occurs. I know other people that it occurs somewhere around the second or third cycle of the day. But you really have to think about it. When are you two the most productive?
In the morning.
You got to think about it. And everybody's different. When are you two productive? Are you late day productive, early day?
Early day.
I mean, if it's late day, it has to be extremely late, like 6 o'clock, then I could get like a second wind. But
second wind. We're going to get to the second wind. That's
okay.
so important.
That's
your
like
second cycle. Yeah, that's your second cycle. All right. So we got that early sun. We got all the stuff. We're doing our work. Key thing is, any exercise that you're doing is occurring during this first 7-hour period, because your body is geared towards that. It's just the way we're DNA. So now it's like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, normal cycle, and we're tired, right? All those chemicals in our body have been consumed and stuff like that. This is a period of time. Again, we're talking about, how do you get a good night's sleep? And this is all leading up to it. A lot of people go, well, I'll take medication to that. That isn't a good night's sleep. That just puts you to sleep. So that second hour, 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're tired. This is a really good time to meditate. And this is a period of what we call deep rest, non-sleep. Deep rest, non-sleep. Some people take naps. That's actually sleeping. But the best thing to do is to do a deep rest. You get that vertical orientation. relax your body, get into that sleep position. By the way, when I do this and I meditate, I usually sleep. I set my alarm for 30 minutes and I wake up. Very rarely do I make it through a deep rest, non-sleep period without the non-sleep not occurring.
Right.
But you're laying there, you're doing your meditations, you're just clearing your mind, and that's a separate conversation. But focusing, I love monk Dante Ponte, who taught me how to focus. Because one of the things that in life that a lot of us aren't taught is, how do you focus, right? I mean, he has this wonderful series that he talks about. As parents, we often tell our kids, or as kids, we often hear our parents say, "Hey, Jerry, focus on your work."
Mhm.
Nobody ever taught me how to focus.
Right.
They just said, focus on it. Focus on your schoolwork. Focus
Yeah.
on the yard work, right? Did
Right.
you go to class for focus? Did your
No,
parents actually
there's
sit
no
down
class.
and teach? Yeah. So we're punished for not having this ability in life, and yet it's so important. And Don DePani, brilliant monk, software engineer, converted to monk. He's a TED talker. You can look him up out there, and he has a whole series on focusing where he talks about, and every time I focus, my eyes close automatically, or as I say, automatically, is you're focusing on the white light and you're moving that around to key concepts. And he talks about that. So I use that technique during my deep rest non-sleep period. And I'm focusing on a issue, which brings all my physiological responses down. I think about that issue. 30 minutes later, my brain has stabilized and it's now ready for the second part of the day. You typically another 5 to 6 hours. And that's where we talk about getting our second wind. So out of that period, now this is the difference between the second period and the first period. First period, we start off with lots of light. The second period now, we're reducing that light, right? It doesn't mean we're shutting off the lights in our house and we're becoming, monks in the basement kind of thing. But what it means is we're going to reduce our physical activity. We're going to reduce the amount of lights we're getting from these guys up in here, from out there, right? It's natural, the sun's going down. We're going to start to reduce it. Doesn't mean to make it zero. It just means naturally over time we're reducing it so that 6 or 7 o'clock, we're getting less lights, artificial lights. We're getting less outdoor lights. Why? Because the body's now going, I know what you want to do. It's time to hibernate. It's time to go to sleep. And so that 7 or 8 o'clock period, which is the most important, is getting away from the electronics, right? I'm probably the worst person in the world. I'm one of those overweight doctors that sits next to your bed and, smoking the cigarette saying, "Hey girls, man, you got to get healthy in life," right? I'm one of those when it comes to this, but having a TV set in your bedroom, if you want to get a good night's sleep, it's very, very bad thing. So one of the things you got to turn off is all those external stimulants that we have. And then from 8 to 9 o'clock, you're in this position where your brain is calmed down and now it's ready for a good night's sleep, right? In that 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock period. By the way, you'll know if you've got a good night's sleep, just measure it over a week or so. If you wake up to your alarm, you didn't get enough sleep. And what you do is you go to sleep earlier. You never try to sleep later. What you do is you say, okay, like example, I'm a 5 o'clock wake up guy every day, 5 o'clock. I know at 5 o'clock, I'm going to get up, I'm going to do my 90-minute cycle, there's no light externally, it's still dark. I have artificial lights. I let those lights bathe me, pop that caffeine in, do a little bit of push-ups and stuff, get the blood going. My brain is ready for my innovation cycle. So if I wake up at 5 minutes to 5, I know that the previous night I went to bed at the right time. If I wake up because my alarm's going off, I am fatiguing myself somehow. So that night I'm going to bed 15 minutes earlier.
What time do you
If
normally
I wake up say again?
What time do you normally go to bed?
So I am normally asleep at 9 o'clock.
Wow.
9 o'clock at night. So
that's not happening over here.
So here's the thing.
I wake up at 5. That's
good. If you wake up at 7, that's a different story. Now, I'm not saying waking up at 5 is like the best thing to do and waking up at 7 is wrong. What I'm saying, for me, I like the quiet comfort that exists between 5 and 7. Right. Nothing in the world is going on around my neighborhood, right? I mean, it's like a zombie apocalypse movie here. There's nothing. There's no Walking Dead. I am not disturbed. I get, for that 2 hours, I get 4 hours of productivity. So for me, it's awesome. For other people, maybe not. So for me, I'm asleep at 9, typically asleep at 9 o'clock. But let's talk about sleep now and what is it about sleep? And you think about it, a lot of people think, this cracks me up. So I'm amazed at how many people think that sleep beyond REM and dreaming, there's no value in it. And if we, and again, this could be something completely, this could be another 5 hours of just fun. First of all, I'm a big believer in hacking your brain, right? This is a electrochemical computer based on a series of neural clusters, that some of which we talked about, the amygdala, which is the fear place, and the basal ganglia, which says, hey, go, no go. It's the one that actually says, I need to do something, right? We have the cortexes. We talked about the frontal cortex, which is the lateral frontal cortex, which is the executive function. And then the most sort of interesting one, the orbital frontal cortex, which injects emotions into those things, which allows you then to paint your neurons with acetylcholine, which then allows you to change your brain at night, right? So we got all that. Hacking that electrochemical computer up there is probably one of the most interesting things to structurally do in life, because it really changes who you are. One of the best places to play with the brain is at night in REM sleep when you're dreaming. Have either of you two ever had a lucid dream where you actually are going, yeah, you're like, hey,
I love that.
This is a dream, right?
I can do whatever I want. Yes, I've done that a few times.
I'm Superman. I'm going to go fly around. I have so back in the day, I was fortunate enough to end my career in the Navy, in a special lab space where they did a lot of sort of interesting programs, dolphin programs, cognitive programs, things like that. And there was this, the Army had this program called Project Stargate, which I had some friends that were in the Army, were responsible. And that was using brain theory, extrasensory perceptions to look out into the world. If you want to take a look at what this is, just look up Dr. Targ and the work that he did with SRI, Stanford Research Institute, back in the 80s and 90s with the CIA. It's all public knowledge now. It's pretty brilliant stuff. He actually talks a lot about that work. The Navy tried to do some of that. It was pretty cool. I was not very effective at it. What the Navy did do, which was really cool, was Project Gateway Experience, which is all about the inside of the brain, which is how can you hack the inside of the brain to do some pretty cool things. One of the things that we were taught in this program, me as a young lieutenant at the end of my lieutenant commander at that time, at the end of my career, working with the psychologist, was lucid dreaming. How do you go from the average lucid dreams are typically 1 or 2 in 100, right? Out of every 100 days of dreaming that you dream most of the time, you just don't recall them. Out of every 100 or so, about 2 of them are lucid, and they're lucid for a brief time. You actually get startled. It's like, shit, I'm in a dream, and you startle yourself out of it. How do you make that 1 in 5, right? And then if you can make them 1 in 5, how do you use them? What would you do if you knew every night when you went to bed, out of the 5 days, 7 days a week, that one of those nights you were going to be able to control what would you do with that time? Well, the Navy taught us how to structure rooms, right, in our brain that we worked in. So for me, I have a place that I go to and it's a structured room where I work. And it's, now it can, if you do too much of this, it's detrimental, right? Because you're not allowing the brain to do what it naturally wants to do, which is clean itself up. But at the same time, you're hacking into this sleep period where you can actually achieve things that you otherwise couldn't achieve. I have a little house on Mars. When I'm really, really stressed out, and I know I'm stressed out, and I can get into this sort of REM lucid dream, lucid being conscious dreaming. So a dreaming state is a unconscious, subconscious process, right? We have 3 layers of the brain. We have the conscious layer, I believe that this is real,
Right,
right?
right.
You have to believe that because this, there are some people that this may not be real. Maybe this is not real for me. So you have a conscious period. You have a subconscious process, which is concurrently operating with your conscious brain, right? There are things in the back. I don't have to tell myself to breathe, right? I don't have to tell myself to blink. I don't have to tell myself to walk or any of that sort of stuff. That's all subconscious. And then you have unconscious areas of the brain, which are really interesting. It's sort of like the Marianas Trench of the mind, right? These are deep areas that are unstructured that we don't know a lot about. The subconscious brain, our subconscious activities, our ability to do certain things like natural language processing, seeing, hearing, tasting, feeling, that sort of thing. We're all pretty much aware of our prefrontal cortex, our lateral thinking stuff around executive functions. We're getting better at that. But the conscious stuff, when we go to sleep at night, when our eyes close, that conscious stuff, that level drops. And we are now letting our subconscious activities take over for that area here. Here's the neat thing. Between this conscious, now there's no conscious brain and subconscious brain, right? But between the conscious constructs and the subconscious, we call this the Limn, the Limn area. And it's like an imaginary wall that prevents our conscious mind from actually looking into the subconscious world. Think about your dreams, think about your nightmares, right? Mm-hmm. And being exposed to those. They're pretty weird, aren't they? I mean, I'm not talking about weird dreams, I'm talking about nightmare dreams, like really strange ones. That's a peek into that subconscious world. Our subconscious mind is not organized for conscious thinking. It is just not. And so we have this wall, this cognitive wall that prevents the barrier. So at night, when we go to sleep, conscious drops down, subconscious kicks in, and dreaming, which is a subconscious activity, part of the acetylcholine, neuromodulator activities out of our brain, bleed over into that conscious mind, right? During that deep rapid eye movement period in there. And that's why we can remember the most important dreams that we remember are the ones with a lot of emotions, right? The emotional. We don't remember, a tenth of what is going on in our brain during those periods, but the emotional ones, like I have a stress dream. Do you guys have stress dreams?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a stress dream that you can share? Some people have stress. Say again?
Like a recurring, like I have a dream that I always dream about, and it's very stressful, but it's like I dream about it often.
Yep.
I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but
here's two common stress dreams, and I'll give you mine. Common one is you show up to class and you're not prepared.
No. Okay.
Right? Everybody. There are others. That's an important one. The second one is typically that you're in the middle of a vast open area and there are things spinning around and you have to constantly jump. Right? That's another common one. For me, coming from the Navy, I can always tell when I'm stressed out is I catch myself being out in the open, out of uniform. My hat's on wrong. I'm missing things. My brass isn't colored right, and everybody's looking at me. Right? It's like, oh shit. And right then and there, I've got to the spot where I go, I am in a dream. Right? Now, here's the neat thing about lucid dreaming is once you recognize you're in a dream, to your point, we can change those things. So every night when I dream and I catch myself in periods of stress, that is an alert for me. Oh, there are devices, by the way, that you can use at night. And there's a lot of peer-reviewed science behind the devices. For example, the flashing red light that you can train yourself for. I actually, I have some headbands that I wear that measure my state of awareness, that sort of thing. Those are all external stimuli that allows you to know whether or not you're in a dream state and what level you are, whether or not what state of consciousness you're in. And then if you're in this sort of subconscious state, to give you a physical indication, flashing red light, that you're there. We used the flashing red light in the Navy so that when we were in the subconscious state, we would see this overwhelming red light flashing, which told us, hey, you're probably in a dream, right? And then you would learn how to craft that. So for me, I've gotten to the spot where anytime I'm in a stress dream, I can now physically change it. I actually unwind it. I take it back to the stress point, change those events, and then go forward again. So lucid dreaming is a very cool thing. Why do I bring that up for affirmations? If you're interested in improving yourself, spending time during this dream cycle on your affirmations is an area where you can actually impact that neuroplasticity of the brain and change your behaviors, right? Because now you've hacked your brain. You can't do it 1 out of 5 times. Maybe you can do it 1 out of 20 times. And maybe you can do what a lot of people do, which is to set an alarm on my Apple Watch. I have an alarm that's set for 1 a.m. and it vibrates on my wrist. So if I'm in a really good state, I go to bed, it's 9 o'clock, my eyes closed, I'm in that slow wave sleep. I finally get into a state around 1 o'clock, I feel it vibrate, I wake up, shallow wake. And when I go back to sleep, I tell myself, I will lucid dream. I will lucid dream. And you're already tired, right? I mean, you're in bed. It's like when you roll over and take a glass of water. You don't have to go through the whole cycle again to go to sleep. You're going back to sleep. When you are aware that you're conscious, I will lucid dream, as you're going back to that subconscious role, get you right into an interesting dream state. Every night, 1 o'clock, vibrates. If I feel it, it's cool. If I don't feel it, I'm probably pretty tired and I've just blown through in that area. So that's sort of the world, waking up in the morning, covering the 3 things, working on your ultradian cycles through the day till around 2 or 3 o'clock, taking that sort of deep rest, non-sleep period, 30 minutes of your life just to get vertical, relax, let the chemicals rebalance in your system, focusing, getting in the afternoon, reducing the light cycle, unwinding the brain. Oh, by the way, between that second half, this is not a time to go out and run your 8K, right? This is not a time for you to exercise. Exercise should occur during that first period.
Darn, I was going to go running this afternoon.
It's okay, right? I mean, we all get used to it, but if you want to tune your body, you want to get it done prior to that second half of that day, right? If you wake up at 6, typically it's 1 or 2 o'clock, after which is the second half. You kind of want to get it done before that period so that you can do that deep rest, non-sleep period, which then takes you into the second part, you're reducing the amount of light and energy in your body. Carbohydrates are good, it's the tryptophan of the body. And then you're working towards that 7, 8 o'clock and weaning yourself off the electronics, the stimulants, the electrical stimulants that is getting your brain to think. You're generally focusing on ideas. 9 o'clock, you're in bed horizontal, meditating on an idea, asleep. 1 o'clock, your wristwatch vibrates. You wake up, roll over, go into a deep sleep saying, I want to lucid dream, and boom, you're in that lucid dreaming period. And you're like going, what do I do now? Right. Wash, rinse, and repeat 7 days a week.
That's amazing. No, it's been a while since I've done the lucid dream and known I was dreaming and was able to do stuff. So I'll have to try that trick.
It's, we spend so much of our life focusing on the wake periods of our life, right? Oh, what am I going to do today? Am I going to get my things done? And then finally at the end of the day, what do we all say? Oh, I'm just tired. Mm-hmm. And you go to sleep. And a lot of people think that 5, 6, 7, 8 hour period is just non-productive time. Now we know it's important, right? But we don't control it's important. And what I ask people to do is, if you think it's really important to get sleep, address the issue of why is it important? And then ask yourself, what could you do during that period to get more value out of it or enhance the value out of it? If it's important enough to do, it's important for us to measure it, and it's important for us to manage it, right? Out of that process. And now what are you doing? You're managing a 24-hour day cycle. Going back to affirmations. When I wake up in the morning, saying the words, I am a good person, does nothing until that night if I have engaged. Now, what happens is during the daytime, when I'm in a stressful situation and I get a trigger that wants to set me backwards, like, I'm a loser, right? Oh, I failed, right? You cognitively fall to the least level of preparedness. That least level of preparedness are the things that we fundamentally believe about ourselves. if you fundamentally believe you're a bad person, when a bad event happens, you tumble down the emotional cycle to the point where you are a bad person. Your brain goes, does your brain know you're not a bad person? Of course not, right? There is nothing in your brain that tells me that this is real. I can touch it. That's a dream. In a dream, I can touch things. I feel things in a dream. What's the difference between, again, assuming of course this is real, what's the difference between this and not real? Everything that we see here is the electrochemical in nature. Again, it's those neuromodulators we talked about, dopamine, epinephrine, serotonin, acetylcholine, that sort of thing. What's the difference in there is our belief in those things, right? So I believe these things are real. And so in that particular case, if you don't have these affirmations, I am a good person, strong visual, emotional context. When you fall off of that, it's like taking a broom on the end of a stick and turning it upside down, putting it out there. You can balance it for a second, right? It'll balance just for a second. As soon as that little micro breeze comes in, it tips over, right? That's the human life, right? We are, as much as we're really flexible, we're resilient in life, we can fall over in a heartbeat mentally, right? It's the things that's the rubber bumpers in our life that supports us. So what I challenge folks to do is raise that level of preparedness. Just don't say you're a good person. Visualize that, find that emotional state in life that you think was important to you, associate that feeling, that emotion with the statement. And as you build through, you can go things. Now, there are certain affirmations we know you shouldn't be doing. Like, for example, this is controversial, I want $1 million. That's less an affirmation and more a statement of desire, right, out of that particular place. Telling my brain I want $1 million and visualizing $1 million and visualizing me sitting on a yacht in the middle of the ocean with that $1 million as an example, it does have an impact to the brain. Those same constructs will work. But when you have a permutation, a disturbance in your force, in your mind that centers you off, and you fall down, your body going, I want $1 million compared to I am a good person, which one are you going to crash through quicker in order to support you? You're going to crash through the million because it doesn't do anything for you. I am a good person is a reminder of the organic good in the human body and the mind that we have. And therefore, there are certain affirmations that are stronger than other affirmations, but all affirmations can work, right?
Okay. No, I love that point about putting the feeling, the emotion behind the statement, because we were talking about that a couple episodes ago, where it's important for affirmations, but this really dives in deeper to share that.
Well, here's one.
Yeah.
And here's one that you two ladies probably know. If you take two organic pieces of tissue and bring them together, right, for a brief second, is that important? No, we call that a kiss. But I bet you, I can ask each and every person who's you two and everybody listening, do you remember your first kiss? Oh yeah, right? And why? It was an event, two organic pieces of tissue coming together.
You're so scientific with this.
Right? There was an emotion associated, right? First of all, you've never done it before. I'm talking to your first one. You've never done that before, right? And in there, you have this dopamine dump, this epinephrine sort of tension, you're like, oh, I've never done this before. It's a little risky here. Will it happen? All those things. And acetylcholine goes, hey, this is an event. I'm dumping a bucket full of acetylcholine on this one.
5 buckets of paint for that one.
Exactly. Songs. There are certain songs in life you'll listen to and you'll go, oh yeah, I remember that, right? Yeah. That's why, by the way, when we get into the bad side of life, seeing being a victim of violence, seeing violence, whether or not there's a thing called vicarious. We know post-traumatic stress disorder, right? You're a witness or a participant in some sort of traumatic event in your life. The same thing happens, by the way. Same thing. I will put a placeholder on the side for folks. There are therapies that remove the emotion from the memory. You'll never get rid of the memory, right? In a car crash, tumble over, you see mom and dad pass away. You're never going to get rid of that. If that memory you recall, you're never going to get it. But there are techniques to remove the emotion from that memory so you can live with the memory, right? In that particular space, in that particular area there. But when we think about music and stuff like that, we can be taking, that's all part of this process in there, which is pretty cool. And that's why affirmations, again, just can't say them. You got to feel them and you got to visualize them. And that first kiss, that first dance are all sort of common things that we all have in common that we can go back to no matter how many years ago they are. I can remember the first one. And it's just part of life, right? That you have. Brain never forgets.
Right. No, that's interesting that
Cool
you
stuff.
talk about music too, Jerry, because you kind of have to be careful, like what kind of lyrics you're singing to or listening to, right? Because that could have an effect.
Well, there's an old saying, right? My mom taught me that I eventually found out to be more true than not. You are the average of the 5 closest people around you, right? And it just isn't physical people. I mean, I tell my kids that all the time. It isn't the physical people around you. It could be something as simple as a book. Because when you read and you get immersed in a story, right? The brain doesn't know that that story is real or not real. When I run, I'm a runner. I run around 8 miles every day religiously. I don't care what the weather conditions. And if it's too cold, I go to the gym and run, God forbid, on a treadmill. But I'm an outdoor runner. When I'm in my zone, I am in my head into a story that's going on. And an hour later, it goes away. So that story, those people in that story that I'm listening to are part of the 5 closest people around my cognitive brain, right? You're right about lyrics, right? If you're constantly singing in your head and feeling good about beating somebody or killing somebody or doing something violent, your brain becomes more accustomed to those areas. Again, it's auto association, right? There's an event, there's an emotion, and there's a visualization that become auto associated with each other. So that later on, when the visualization comes, the feeling, the emotion of that event reoccurs, and it allows you to do that event more seamlessly. It's what we call duration, process, and outcome, DPOs, in the cognitive brain. Humans are, by the way, humans are unique. We're the only species that I'm aware of today, and I don't think anything has changed in like the last 6 months or so, only species that actually thinks about its future, right? I can think about this afternoon, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. I can plan for those things, right? We're the only species that does this DPO. I can actually say, for the next 5 minutes duration, I'm going to think about my emails, and my outcome is to reduce my M basket. Chimpanzees, brilliant electrochemical brain structure. Dolphins, elephants. By the way, elephants, they have more mass structure than the human brain, right? They don't have this ability. So that makes us unique in this process. So if you're using that time to associate these visualizations and feelings with some events, right? As soon as you visualize those things again, you're more inclined to take a step with what? Take a step with your basal ganglia, which says, go do something in that space. It's auto-associative. You are more naturally inclined. In the afternoon, as soon as my one event is done, I begin to think about putting my running shoes on, taking my clothes off, putting my running shoes on, getting my AirPods in and running. I think about that. I get a dopamine dump. My body is preconditioned to an event that hasn't even happened yet.
Yeah.
I am feeling that stuff.
Right.
And then when I do the run, I have a post. We call them bookending stuff, a whole different story. But you're right. Music, reading, hanging out with people.
Well, it's interesting that you said, like, you are the sum of the 5 closest people to you, because I always assumed it was physical people. And I didn't even think about the books that you read or maybe the music that you listen to. I never thought of that. So that's a really important tip.
I love rap. I was fortunate enough to spend some time in the rap industry in a previous life, helping do videos and converting what was called booty music to, if you listen to rap, it can be very dark, right? The stories that are told are often from the John Forte, friend of mine, John Forte. What is his story? 6 years in prison, right? Comes out, and he has a unique rap style of singing and rap and telling his story about coming to an understanding in his life. But there are certain kinds of music that if you consume more and more, you become more and more, more and more inclined to do that. I even have to take it in moderation.
Right.
I love Tom McDonald, right? I mean,
Me
my
too.
goodness.
He's
I
awesome.
mean, he's totally awesome, right? But
Yeah.
even his music, as much as I love it, I have to take a step back from it, because I ask myself, is that the way I want my body to respond, right, to that, even though I love it? And the answer is no, I don't. So I take it in ice cream. I love ice cream. Would I eat a gallon of ice cream every freaking night if it had 0 calories? You bet your life I would, right? But I don't do it because I don't want to expand into a large person. Again,
everything in moderation, including
everything in moderation, and including the concepts that surround you, the people that surround you, right?
Right.
And then I always ask people is, what was the 1 or 2 things that you think you want to learn from the 5 closest people around you today? Visualize it, put some emotion to it. So when you go to sleep tonight, it's painted and it's recovered and put permanently into your system. Oh, when you wake up at night and you remember a dream, the dream diaries, those are important. So when you write, you're doing this, you're actually telling your brain, hey, that thing that you were doing with me, one of the purposes of dream is to raise to the surface of our consciousness things that are going on that the subconscious believes kind of to be important. Now, this is a little pseudoscience in here. There's not a lot of structured research around this sort of thing, but there's a belief system that when things like this surface, it's your brain trying to figure out, is this important, right? There's some people that believe that. And that's why when we write them down and we write, oh, I remember, yeah, you're telling your brain this was important. So the next time it knows how to better process. There's some research that says as we write down the things that we remember in our brain from our dreams, that those things become more ingrained in our system. The act of writing is a neural dynamic process that coats acetylcholine onto the events, because it's a physical act of doing something.
Jerry, this is all amazing.
Here's one thing I would just tell anybody out there. If you're out there and you're going, I'm bored, call me. Because you have a brain. And if all you do is spend a half an hour researching just your brain, it's a rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. It's a rabbit hole about this big that your body will fit through. And when you get into that rabbit hole and you start meeting Alice and her gang down there, and you start discovering all this sort of stuff, you just, like me, there are a lot of people that go, life isn't exciting because of you. Life is exciting because of me and my understanding of what this thing is doing and how I can control aspects of it to make me better, right, less lonely, more happy, less searching, more fulfilled, right? And recognizing how all those words are coupled to the chemicals in the brain that process the way that it does. Once you learn those things, the world becomes so different. I just, I get frustrated when I hear young people say, they're bored, life doesn't have meaning, they don't know what to do. And I'm just thinking to myself, oh, what I wouldn't be to be your age, right? Knowing what I know today, but that's just something to think about, right? And I really mean that. If you're at that spot in life where I'm involved in a lot of mental health areas, especially around suicide prevention. One of the things that we know most in suicide prevention is that people with animals are when they feel like they want to commit suicide, are less likely to commit suicide when the animal's involved in their life. Why? Because they're taking care of something, right? They feel like they don't feel necessarily loved. They feel like they're loving something. People will commit suicide if they feel loved. People will often not commit suicide if they're caring for other things. Right. And so having animals in people's lives is important. So giving people a purpose and showing them what that purpose is super important in this sort of world.
Another reason
the mental world. Was that useful today?
It was
so interesting. Like I could talk to you for hours on this, and I feel like there's so much good stuff.
I say, let's go do more of this stuff, right? I challenge everybody, pick lucid dreaming. And go, how do you lucid dream? And just go read that stuff. And then when you come across a concept, and this is how you grow, when you come across any concept, let's just start with lucid dreaming. And you read it and say, what is that? Go read about it. Spend that day's purpose isn't to get better at lucid dreaming. That day's purpose is to get better at the thing that you don't understand that is part of the lucid dreaming. That's what I mean by a rabbit hole. It will then take you. It will take you. For example, acetylcholine.
Yeah.
Go find out what that is. What parts of the brain does it? Now, you're going to start off by going, these words are big. These words I don't know. I should have paid attention in biology and anatomy class, right? Right. But the adult brain, assuming of course you don't have any physical abnormalities, has neuroplasticities. It's not like a child's brain. When you're between 0 and let's just say 22, 23 years old, especially when you're in your up to your teens, your brain is like an early stage of jello, man. It can, that's the stage you learn all the languages. That's the stage that's constantly changing in that process. For adults, we still can do it. It just requires a little bit more work. Requires a little bit, and especially if, and this is a message for those who may be substance use disorder victims, aka addicts out there. For those who don't know, I've been involved with as a parent of recovering heroin addicts for 10 years now. So spend a lot of time with people who are addicted to substances in there. Those kind of substances don't help you, right? In the sense of you think they do. They certainly have a way to influence that dopamine in your brain, right? Then immediately once you take something, you get this epinephrine kicker in there, that this, again, tension kicker that says, I need to go get more of it afterwards. You get in this cycle in that process. Chemicals in general don't help the brain, right? Now I'm not talking pharmaceutically from a sociological or a psychological perspective. Certainly there are disorders in the world, depressions in the world, that we know there are certain chemicals that will help modulate the brain better and stabilize. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about recreational use of this stuff. If you really want to grow your brain, if you want it to be healthy and be as neuroplastic, changeable as it can, start with a good day, get that rest in the afternoon, balance carbs and proteins, turn off the lights and music, or turn off the lights and electronics at night, focus on a subject, hack the brain in your dreams, and you watch, your world's going to change. It's just an amazing place.
Thank you so much. That was
great, Barry.
Absolutely.
Not a problem.
So glad to have you on here.
Yeah.
I hope those that are listening find some value in it. And for those that don't find value in it, I'd ask you to give me a call, right?
Yeah.
Just tell me why you're not important.
Right. And you have a lot of good articles out there on LinkedIn. And if anyone has questions, they can always email us at loveboldandboss@gmail.com. And we got to do this again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you later on.
All right. Until next time, guys, live bold and boss up.